But the next one we're going to jump into for panel 4 is community college workforce programs. So we've got some wonderful community colleges here on Delmarva, and we want to figure out how employers can do a better job working with them to make sure that the community college is providing the needs of those employers, and those employers are doing what they can to invest back into that system. So first we've got Stephen McGee. He's the president of Chesapeake Shipbuilding Corporation and the vice president of American Cruise Lines. Thank you, Stephen. You surprised me coming from that side, man. Keeping me on my toes. All right. B. Scott Hall, the Workforce and Business Solutions Officer with Eastern Shore Community College. And then a friend and colleague of mine, Mr. Patrick Townsend. He's our Senior Director of Human Resources at Mount Air Farms. So let's give them a big round of applause. All right, so we figured out which remote works, and we've got about an hour for you gentlemen, so each of you has 15 to 20 minutes or so, and if we can leave some time for questions, I think we've got an audience that is engaging. So I'll let you kick it off.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, Steve McGee, and I'm going to try and just show you a lot of pictures and a couple of videos and move it along, get to lunch for you. But piggybacking on the difficulties with sewage, we deal with that on every one of our ships that we build, and I can really feel for the local communities trying to get that through. It's an incredibly difficult process, and getting the materials right now is another challenge. But that being said, here in Salisbury, we primarily design and build cruise ships, and we find that most people have no idea, even though they've lived here for most of their lives. So what I want to do today is talk about the fact that we have a workforce that we are growing rapidly, and that workforce is really well served by non-collegiate level, but like the community college level and the programs related to that out of trade schools. We can provide employment for those folks, and we need them. And what I'm finding over the last few years is doing explosive growth is incredibly difficult in any condition, and doing that while wages are skyrocketing has been one of the challenges that we've had to overcome over the last year and a half. So a little bit about the yard. This kind of just talks about the different departments. So as I go through the pictures, I won't hone on too many things, but generally speaking, in the yard, 70% of the workforce at some point during the work week will weld. So for us, that's pretty much a fundamental skill that spans the electrical department, the pipe fitters, the plumbers, and of course welders and fitters. So the way we do the process starts off with concepts that come in from the owner, and they say, hey, this is what we want, this is how we want it to operate, this is what we want to do with it, and we will form that into general arrangements. And up here I've got two of them. Recently we designed the Salisbury class of tugboat. It's a push tug. One of the first in the United States actually designed and built when the Code of Federal Regulations actually brought that industry into what's called certification. So we ended up building 4 of those for Vane Brothers, and 3 of them operate the Wicomico on a daily basis. And on the right is the new coastal cats, they're calling them. So we've got commitment for a dozen of these cruise ships. They're smaller, but we should see probably year-round going forward 2 of these operate in the Chesapeake Bay all the time, and then run in the East Coast. So we'll take those designs, we'll do some preliminary drawings, we'll figure out some basics, and then from there we'll virtually build a 3D model of the ship in a computer software system. We'll do a lot of other tests and things like that, but we're heavy on the engineering side. We don't do that part all in-house. So at that point, we go into the phase where we build this vessel traditionally. In the larger vessels, because of the size of our buildings, are in 2 halves. So at this phase of construction, we're very, very heavy on steel workers, people that are gonna just manhandle steel, work under cranes, riggers, welders, and just steel fabricators. After we build the framework of the vessel, the ribs as it were, we pull on the plate. And again, it's the same guys doing it, the come-alongs, and they're just manhandling the material. From there, we get into a lot of requirements related to how you join pieces of steel together. So a lot of our guys are pretty well versed in how steel is going to stretch, how it's going to deform, and we will take all that into account in the actual design so that when we pull that steel up and wrap complicated shapes like what is shown here, it actually goes perfectly in and creates perfectly round holes for the pipes and different objects. And then at this phase of construction, a lot of back gouging so that we can get good penetration for our welds. So once we get through that phase, we'll build some of the vessel, and then we get into industrial painters. And one of the things that we get at the yard a lot is applicants that say, hey, I painted my grandma's house, or I've been painting houses for 30 years. Unfortunately, those guys don't work out. Paint on the scale that we do is called industrial paint. Sandblasting with hoods and ventilation systems, very specific mixing of chemicals. It's almost more of a chemist than it is a painter. And then from there, how they apply those different layers of paint is all dependent on environmental conditions, what the humidity is, what the temperature. Right now, I've got guys putting the final coats on that one that I just had a picture of as we speak, because we happen to be able to do it all inside of one of our buildings, and we're able to control the conditions inside that building. But expert house movers, another local company, will come put wheels under our half a vessel, and they will roll it out to the seawall. And next boat, that's happening on Monday. After the bow comes out and gets set, then we'll bring the stern out. Usually it's a lag of about 5 to 6 weeks later. Now at this phase of construction, we have a lot of different activities going on. Pipe fitters, electricians, in addition to just raw welding, ship fitting, metal fabrication. Our subcontractors start really getting involved in this phase of construction as well. And these guys come from all over the United States. And they'll start putting in bulkheads and subdividing rooms and things of that nature. Of our subs, what general rule of thumb, for every shipyard employee, for every 4 shipyard employees, I have about 1 sub at any given time. 12 months ago, the shipyard had 104 full-time employees. I checked yesterday, we're currently at 198, and I've got about 50 subcontractors on site today. I need to add another 50 just for the shipyard side to meet where I want to get to for our deliveries. So as you look in these next few phases, you'll see the other trades start to really get involved during the construction, where in this photo you can see a lot of the wires. And these wires are power cables, they're internet, there's copper nickel pipe, there's stainless steel pipe. There is sheet metal work going on to start forming what you're looking there is a photograph of down a hallway, which will ultimately be a bunch of cabins. Now you're starting to see a little further on the same general cabin run down the main passageway of a cruise ship, where we've got these aluminum bulkheads that have structural fire protection insulation wedged inside. On the overhead, you're starting to see some of the piping and the cooling systems and the HVAC systems going in. So our subcontractors that do a lot of our HVAC work, they're really engaged at this phase of construction. Our electricians and pipe fitters, and there's one pipe fitter there, heavily engaged. So as soon as walls can go up, those guys are running their lines to do the bathrooms, to do the toilets, showers, potable water, so on and so forth. Then we get into the phase where now final things are starting to pop up in the same corridor. The structural fire protection insulation is in the overhead. The foil is in there. The bulkheads are up, access panels are installed, electricians have final lighting hung. The fire main, you can see one of the stubs for the fire main for its main valve is already fitted. And then down below decks is the guts of the boat. And this is where a lot of our skilled tradesmen are heavily involved with pulling heavy miles and miles and miles of cabling, piping. And you'll see like here, you know, we work in various different electrical voltages, 480, 208, 12 volt, 24 volt, 120. So these guys, they learn all those skills, and by and large, our guys are not necessarily like they are for a household electrician, for instance, but a person that's generally good with electrical systems. They can learn how we do it, because it is a bit different than it is on, say, this building. But at the end of the day, the final product will be very similar to what this looks like. And then on our system side, we have a lot of guys that are part plumber, part pipe fitter, part machinist, and then mechanics. So here you've got circulating pump systems for various different HVAC-related systems throughout the ship. And of course, the boat has to move itself. You've got main engines, generators, we'll have Z-drives for propulsion, some will have shafts with propellers, cooling systems, lube oil, jacket water, a whole host of others. So one of the things that I get asked about a lot is how do we put it in the water? Well, when we get those two modules put together, typically we have about 1,300 tons of steel. We'll take 2 inclined planes, we'll block underneath the boat, and we'll basically let gravity do the work for us. Let's see if I can get this to work.
This is it.
This is a slow motion video from a year or two ago of one of our modern riverboat class of vessel. So what you're looking at here is from the aft end of the vessel, we have cut 2 steel plates simultaneously, and there's a special kind of ship launching wax and grease that creates an interface between these 2 steel slides. And it's just a slip and slide right into the river. So for us, this is about 5 to 6 months after we start construction, we get to this phase of construction. And hours-wise, just the activities related to our trades folks to get ready for launch is typically about 2,800 to 3,200 man hours to pull off what was just shown there in that angle. And then same thing again, just from a different vantage point across the river. And people ask, does it create a wave? Yeah. And then we spend the next day and a half actually scouring the river, cleaning up anything that we put in it, pulling out wall or wax. Boat fixing, heating, ventilation, and cooling system, front yard, water intake, so on and so forth. So after we get to that phase, then we really get into the final fit and finish. So here's the bow, or the pilot house of one of the tugs that we delivered to Vane Brothers right before it left. A lot of fine work that goes into the carpentry and just the final spit and polish. That's actually the galley of the Salisbury class of tugboat. I mean, granite countertops with some pretty fancy inlays, stainless steel. And these are some shots of what our cruise ships look like. So this is actually the one that we delivered just a few months back. You can see different cabins, the central stair tower, a couple of different lounges. We do a lot of stainless steel with glass work inlaid. All that's done in the yard. And then one of our older boats, before we did an upgrade on the interiors, this is what it looks like from one of the high-end staterooms for a vessel in service. And just, again, more pictures of the types of vessels that we build. So that being said, I got a couple of videos, but I don't think we're going to have time. But when we do launch a boat and deliver, it goes into service. And my workforce will continue to kind of do a peak and a valley depending on their trade. And what I have found is that success to our employees is somebody eager enough to show up for work consistently, sober enough to be at work consistently, and the guts to just stick it out. And that's not for everybody, and that's okay. But what we have found is like the Archon program out of Warwick has been fantastic. Those folks, roughly speaking, I think I've hired a dozen of them now, maybe even 13 as of today. Of those, all but one have sustained employment past, the 6-month point. I can't say that for my regular workforce that I just get off the street. That program is very successful. I currently have 2 foremen who are under the age of 30 who are Archon graduates, and they're extremely successful. So that program, kudos. We're trying to support them as well as they continue to develop into the new building. But those programs at the local community colleges, through the local staffing agencies, through the local just different programs that start at the high school level, they're critical to us. And with the doubling of our workforce and the continued growth that we're forecast to do through 2030, they're going to become even more critical, because now I'm going to start getting into some aluminum vessel construction, in addition to delivering at least 3 cruise ships a year. And to put that in perspective, that's every 4 months trying to get a multi-tens of millions of dollars piece of steel down the river, while also building some aluminum vessels to put on the back of it. So we might be jumping back into our warehouse expansion that we recently got, just for the growth that we've got to do to meet that. And economically, I know I talked about some forecasting things. On the cruise line side, switching my hat around, after we go into service, on the cruise line side, we've got about 1,500 employees throughout the United States. There are currently 14 cruise ships operating from Alaska, Puget Sound, the Columbian Snake Rivers out all the way to Idaho, Mississippi River system up to Pittsburgh, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and everywhere in between. All of New England, and down all the way to Florida on the East Coast. We're adding itineraries down in California here in a month or so, and looking at maybe going out into the Pacific. So as we continue to grow, we have huge turnover on the cruise line side. So folks that are in hospitality, and this is from cooks, chefs, hotel services, housekeeping, deckhands, all have valued employment with our cruise line, and we hire, well, thousands of those folks. So all of those trades, it starts here in Salisbury. We design it, we build it, we deliver it. It goes out into the United States, and then there's a tremendous opportunity for growth and for employment through our companies.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Stephen. It's a very unique business that you have, and we're grateful to have it here in Wacomico County. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the other side, I think, of this equation, which is going to be the community colleges and the role that they play. So we've got B. Scott Hall, the Workforce and Business Solutions Officer with Eastern Shore Community College.
All right, thanks, Nat. And appreciate the chance to be here this morning. I am Scott Hall, Workforce and Business Solutions Officer at Eastern Shore Community College. I've been there at ESCC now for about 3 years, native of Southern West Virginia, graduated from Marshall University, 7.5 years in the Navy, surface warfare, went on to graduate school at ODU and got my master's in urban studies, and then spent about 23 years practicing local economic development in Hampton Roads. And like I said, I've been at ESCC now for about 3 years. Oh, okay. One of the things I want to explain before I get into, I think, got my slides, different set of slides, but you'll see in the bottom corner the YES logo. And I just want to take some time to explain that. YES is not just a logo for ESCC, it's actually our culture, and it stands for Your Eastern Shore. We all know that one of the easiest things in the world is to get somebody to say no to something. So we adapted this culture of yes, Your Eastern Shore. It forces not just the faculty and staff and the students, but also the entire community to take ownership of our Eastern Shore. And when you take ownership, then that denotes accountability. So we're able to hold ourselves and each other more accountable for what we're doing as a community college and as a community. I got the wonky one. Got the wonky one, but that's okay. We're going to talk about some, no, not the wonky one, actually, the different presentation. Yeah, slides out, but that's okay. Before I get into the trends and issues, just want to kind of frame something. that's really driving all of economic or workforce development and economic development right now is the skills gap or the worker shortage. And it's really a basic supply and demand issue. I mean, if you look right now, Virginia, statewide, 2.6% unemployment. Accomack County, 2.5%. Northampton County, 3%. That equates to about 400 people who are unemployed. Look in Maryland, 4% unemployment, 4.2% in Wycomico County, 4.6% in Worcester County. So we're really, I mean, looking at a true supply and demand. And so we're having to reach out to those learners, potential employers who are facing the greatest barriers. And so some of the things that we're dealing with on trends and issues are, what new programs, and coming up with new programs, trying to rehash in some ways a lot of old programs, and renewed emphasis on apprenticeships, restructuring of workforce organizations, and then coming up with some new innovations like incentives, micro badges. Incentives in Virginia, they started about a year and a half ago a new incentive program. It's a public-private partnership, actually funded 100% by the business community. It's called the Virginia Ready Scholars Program. So it provides a $1,000 award to students who complete credential in specific high-demand skill areas. But again, we're also facing some serious issues, such as child care, elder care. The labor force participation rate right now is in the 60 to 65% range. I think historically it was in the 65 to 70% range. And we hear a lot about people that are dropping out of the workforce, but in reality, most of those people who are not participating are those who really can't. They're facing significant barriers of entry into the education system as well as the workforce. As things facing issues like child care, elder care, their own health care issues, access to transportation, access to technology, whether it's broadband internet access. They don't have home computers. Many students, their only access to the internet is through their mobile device. And it's really hard to function as a learner just using your cell phone. So, so many different barriers to entry for these students. And so, so there's a lot of different doorways that we have to create for them. At Eastern Shore Community College, we've set up, we're actually kind of got a unique structure, especially when you look at the Virginia community colleges. We have our Regional Adult Education Program and our WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act office, embedded within not just the community college, but also within the Workforce Development Department. So that allows me to really leverage a lot more resources in creating programs and providing services and learning opportunities to our students, because we really can't just simply train our way out of this skills gap or this worker shortage. We really have to go above and beyond and meet the students where they are. And that happens through leveraging our services. At ESCC, we take an integrated education and training program approach to workforce development. And what this does is it creates a lot of different pathways, on-ramps for our learners to get into the learning, into the workforce development system. So they can come on as a WIOA client, they can come on as an adult education student, whether they're getting their GED or they're an ESL student. They can come in as a workforce student, and then go on in and then proceed on to the academic side of the house and obtain either a career study certificate or a transfer degree. But they also can exit at any one of these stages and then come back on again. So it's a structure that really helps for us. And you'll notice at each of the blocks the word coaching. And I really should have used the phrase supportive services, because while IETs allow us to do or to provide supportive services to the students at every step of the way. And these include gift cards at Food Lion. You know, every student that goes through an IET will give them a $100 gift card to Food Lion to help remove some of those food insecurities. We partner with Royal Farms to provide $50 gas cards to our students to help them help remove some of those transportation issues that they're facing in getting to work. We have coaches available for them. We also create cohorts, learning cohorts in these IET programs so that the students learn accountability. Again, going back, that's a key tenet of Eastern Shore Community College, our culture of yes, our culture of accountability. By going in as an IET cohort, they hold, not only do the instructors and the college hold the students accountable and for learning the material, but they're able to hold each other accountable for progressing through what's really a competitive process. You know, when they start an IET cohort, which leads into a credentialing program, there's not a guarantee that they'll get a seat in the credentialing class. They have to successfully demonstrate that they're ready to proceed. The IETs provide them exposure to financial literacy, digital literacy, things like CPR, medical terminology for healthcare fundamentals classes. We also expose them to trauma-informed care to help them understand themselves better and learn how to deal with other people better. You know, it's a step of preparing them to enter the workforce, going beyond just providing a credential. The IETs target specific populations, especially we started out on a healthcare fundamentals targeting single mothers who are SNAP and TANF recipients. So we put them in a group, a cohort together. They're able to provide support to each other, and we're also able to provide the necessary supportive services to help them succeed, put them in a position to succeed. On the trade side, we'll provide OSHA 10 certification to the students. We'll provide math boot camps, construction math boot camp for them. Again, it's setting them up for success, allowing them to achieve in that cohort, in that IET cohort, so that they're ready to move on to the credentialing program and then proceed into the workforce. Because they'll know how to work together. They'll know what the expectations of the workforce are. They'll know how to hold themselves accountable. Some of the successes we've had. This is a picture of our first apprentice medical scribe class. It was a partnership with Eastern Shore Rural Health. They provided the instructor. They also guaranteed job interviews to all of the students who successfully completed the program. They didn't guarantee jobs, but they guaranteed interviews. But about 60% of the completers were actually hired by Eastern Shore Rural Health. We partner with Eastern Shore Regional Jail in their reentry cohort. We actually provide workforce credentialing programs to the inmates so that when they finish their incarceration, they have credentials that they can take then to the private sector. We also treat the inmates as Eastern Shore Community College students. Again, part of that culture of yes, culture of inclusion, culture of accountability, which fits in with the experience that they're going through at the jail. Most, I can't say most, but probably about 50% of the graduates of the reentry cohort have successfully landed jobs in their field of credentialing. We also are seeing now students the inmates return to ESCC as traditional academic students to pursue their academic career. Certified nurse aide. This has been the biggest success we've experienced. Again, initially developed for the single mothers. The level of success that these students have experienced has been incredible. This past spring, we had a 100% success rate for these students in taking their statewide certification exam. The program directors now have asked me to basically switch our nurse aide program from an academic program to a workforce program and require all of the students to go through the IET and go through the healthcare fundamentals program, because it just prepares them that much more before they go in. And we have a strong nursing program. I mean, we're actually the #1 LPN program in the state of Virginia. So, for those program directors to come and say, we like what you're doing, we're seeing that IET works, and we want to make this a standard for all of our nurse aide students. And to me, that's a pretty good stamp of approval. We're expanding our IET programs at ESCC to include CDL program. Great thing about IET is that we're able to scale it. On the CDL side, we're providing remedial assistance for our non-native English-speaking students. I actually have an ESL instructor that will meet with the students once a week to help them, whether they're having issues getting through their classroom portion of the CDL class. A lot of students have trouble, CDL students have issues passing the pre-trip exam portion of the licensing program. So our ESL instructor will sit with them and go through the process and make sure that they understand the expectations. ServSafe, again, will provide in-class assistance for non-native English-speaking students. We're doing the remedial math for our trade students. Technology side, and actually all of our IETs include digital literacy, financial literacy, resume writing, job interviewing skills, in addition to industry-specific credentials. So it really is a program that works for us. I will say that the Virginia Community College System is using us now as a model on how to implement IETs, and so they're using us as a model for the other 23 schools in the community college system there. But there is no easy button to solving the workforce issues that we're facing. It really takes a lot of creativity, willingness to step outside the lines. You have to remove the barriers, not just barriers to entry for our learners, but also the barriers between academics and workforce within our community colleges. We have at the ESCC a jar, the credit, non-credit jar. If you say credit, non-credit, you have to put $1 in the jar. We're not using the word training anymore. We are educating, we're teaching all of our students. Every student that enters the campus, every learner is considered a student of ESCC. Every program completer walks at commencement, whether they've completed an ESL program, they've achieved their GED, they've earned a workforce credential, or they've completed a class such as hair braiding and weaving. We still let them walk at commencement with those who have received their 2-year degrees, because they're all learning, they've all achieved. And when we recognize those levels of achievement, then that just increases that sense of self-worth for our learners. And we think better prepares them to enter the workforce, because they have that sense of value. They see they've been able to experience those successes at this college level. And so with that, I'd be more than happy to talk with you all offline, or if we have time, take questions. But it's really exciting. And again, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to workforce development. You have to really take a hard look internally, like we did at ESCC, and establishing that culture of yes. You really have to engage with the business partners and engage with the students where they are at this point in time.
Thank you so much, Scott. So we're gonna let Pat do his presentation, and then when we wrap up, if we've got a few minutes for questions, we'll take it. And Scott, I appreciate you working through our technological issues. He's got a great set of slides here, and I know we had them a little out of order. So last but most certainly not least, a friend and colleague of mine, Mr. Pat Townsend. Go ahead and kick it off, Pat.
All right, thank you, Scott, or Zach. And thanks for everybody for having us here this morning as well. So just a little bit of history about me. I'm the Director of Human Resources at Mount Air Farms. I've been there 14 years. Prior to that, I worked in vaccine and pharmaceuticals for about 20 years, most of that time in the HR space. Born and raised in Wicomico County, graduate from Salisbury University. My wife is a graduate from Salisbury University. My daughter is a graduate from Salisbury University. And my son is the most recent graduate last May. So we got a little bit of a history here with Salisbury University. On that topic and kind of thinking about my job as Director of Human Resources, and I won't go into a lot of details, but if you ever want to know how a person who graduates from Salisbury University with a degree in biology and a minor in chemistry and ends up in HR, I'll tell you a story later on about that. I want to talk a little bit about Mount Air Farms because the topic today is about labor. So we'll spend a little bit of time, about the company, and my presentation is very much centered around, the needs for labor. And man, have we felt it in the last 3 years, right? But Mount Air Farms is a vertically integrated poultry company. We're about 10,000 employees. I like to tell people, really, we're a food manufacturing company, right? Manufacturing is key. Most manufacturing companies start with parts or raw materials and turn things into products. We start with a product and we turn it into parts. And those are, high value parts that maybe 10 years ago we would say you enjoyed for lunch or dinner, and now we say you enjoy them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the advent of the chicken biscuit, right? So a lot going on there with what we do, and a lot going on from a labor need when you have 10,000 employees. Mount Air Farms, you're probably never going to walk into a grocery store and pick up a tray of chicken that says Mount Air Farms on it. So our business model is around private label retail. So if you go buy store brand chicken in your store, that could be Mount Air Farms. And we sell a tremendous amount of our product into food service as well. We're the third largest vertically integrated poultry company in the United States. We move about 8.2 million heads a week. So if you do the math on that, that's 65 million pounds a week or so. And we have operations in Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina, and our headquarters in Little Rock, Arkansas. About half of our employees are here, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia. So a good number of the people, that we need to run what we do on a daily basis are employed in the local area. The other thing, coming from a completely different industry into what I do today, I'd like to share with people is there is much more to the poultry industry than a chicken house, a live haul truck, and a processing plant. We hire all kinds of people, from general labor to nurses to project engineers to HR professionals, IT professionals, human resources professionals, safety, engineering, accounting, you name it. All of those support departments that you need to run any business, we hire those people.
I even convinced them to hire me.
Well, and Zach as well, right? So I like to refer Zach, if any of you have been around for a while, Zach is the younger, better looking version of Roger Marino, if you remember Roger. We love Roger. But, we have very diverse needs, but obviously a great deal of that is around, the labor that goes into the processing plants as well. So that's a little bit about Mount Air Farms. When Zach asked me about this, and he put a presentation together on me yesterday. There's another story behind that as well. So when I put this title slide together and I had the Mount Air Farms logo on it, and what I put next to it is a table with people sitting around it and puzzle pieces. Because when we talk about solving our staffing and our labor needs, it's a great big giant jigsaw puzzle. And there's not a singular approach to that that's going to help you solve that problem. And so I was given kind of 5 topics to talk about, and so I don't have any really nice presentation pictures from inside our plants, which you guys might enjoy or not, right before lunchtime.
You can blame me for that.
But anyway, I'm going to speak from the perspective of the company and what I see as an HR professional around what's driving things and what are we doing about it to try to solve for those problems. I say try to solve for those problems because it's something we got to fight and battle every day to do. And it's really a long-term strategy for that. So the first thing, I was asked to talk about is how has labor or the skill shortage affected your business or the business you serve? So for our business, again, we have really, really felt it in the last 3 years. And I think I'd be remiss to talk about solving a labor shortage without talking about the first thing, and that's retention. We had to rethink everything that we knew and thought about how, not only were we going to hire the staff and the talent that we need, but how would we retain that? So everything from facilities to wages to benefits to how do you get people to work to on-site health and wellness centers to discussions around on-site daycare and things of that nature as well. I mean, we are wide open, have been wide open, still are wide open on the things that we need to do, not only to get the staffing we need, but to keep them once they're there. Up to and including the point that every week there's a phone call that's led by the VP of Operations, not an HR person, the VP of Operations for our company to talk about what was retention last week, what do we know about the people we lost. We are doing roundtable sessions, retention meetings. We have hired retention supervisors, people who onboard our new hires. Not only people who onboard our new hires, but onboard them in their native language. We have a lot of Hispanics. We have a lot of Haitian Creole people that work for us as well. And they are much more comfortable, if they have someone who's talking to them in their native language about what their needs are. And their needs are diverse, from what's going on in your house to how do I get to work and everything in between. So first and foremost, strategic planning and actions around retention. The second thing is, what we've seen over the last, 3 years, maybe a little bit longer, that if you pay attention is wages have gone up considerably. So the need to revisit wages, to revisit salary ranges and things of that nature as well. We're paying a lot of attention to that and taking action on it as well. And then last but not least, even with all of that, we still struggle on a daily basis. When you have a department that needs 100 people to run, we're staffing that with 112, 113 people, right? Full-time jobs with benefits. Because we need 100 people at work every day. Because someone calls out sick, someone has vacation, someone's car broke down, whatever that might need, so it's not just 100 people that we need on payroll. We need more than that to make sure that we have enough every day. Our supply chain back to the egg and to birds in the plant, that's about 11, 12 weeks, right? So those birds are coming. They're already in play and they're coming whether we got the people on board to do that or not. Now, despite all those efforts, we're evaluating automation. What do we need to do? What automation do we need to bring in? If you've been in a poultry processing plant recently, you see that there's a tremendous amount of automation, but it also still takes a tremendous amount of humanity to get the job done. And we really are relying on that as well. So, I guess in summary about, how's it affected us, we felt it. We were fortunate in the middle of COVID not to be companies that had to pull back on what we were doing from an operations standpoint, and we continued to operate, but we had to just do things and approach things differently, carry birds over, whatever it might be to get that done. So with regards to labor and the second bullet point, what has our organization done to find the labor we need? Again, we're just wide open. The first point is a workforce strategy and a workforce plan that includes what we call boots on the ground, right? We've expanded our talent acquisition and employment staff in order to accomplish that. We try to get everywhere there's people and talk to them about opportunities for employment at Mount Air Farms, whether that be a church event, a festival, a yard sale, whatever it might be. We're doing that, and we're doing that, face-to-face interaction with folks to get that accomplished. We're also using a lot more technology and continue to develop that technology from what we've done in the past. So geofencing, retargeting approaches to people that are on social media, internet, things of that nature, redirecting them back to us when they're out there doing a certain type of search to bring Mount Air Farms and job opportunities, career opportunities to the forefront with that. We have an always-on strategy from a talent acquisition perspective around certain positions. General labor, obviously. We hire nurses. We have on-site occupational health offices. We have on-site health and wellness centers that we third-party through Premise Health, but still, we hire nurses, doctors, and things of that nature as well. Maintenance. We've talked a lot about this from the community college perspective today. Even for us, that's even at the technical high school level too. Getting back in, making sure our students understand the opportunities that we have and we can present from them. And frontline supervision is always a need for us. So our strategy there, we call always on. We're full-time. Recruiting should be a full-time job, and hiring a part-time job doesn't always work out that way. Right now, hiring is a full-time job as well, and recruiting is more than a full-time job. Part of what we're here to talk about today, the partnerships with community colleges and technical high schools to fill labor needs like CDL and maintenance. This is something I'm very passionate about. I spend a lot of time, whether it be here on the shore or in North Carolina, working with our community colleges and technical high schools. CDL drivers, huge shortage in this country for CDL drivers. 5 years ago, we would say you got to have your CDL and 3 to 5 years of experience to come work at Mount Air Farms. Then we pulled that back to 2 years, and we pulled that back to 1 year, and then we're still not where we need to be. So in this instance, we worked with Delaware Technical Community College and some folks that were part of their business up there and formerly part of that. And we built what we call a driver finishing program, right? Our CDL drivers aren't like all the other CDL drivers you see going up and down the road. They drive on the farms. They drive on the dirt roads. They drive on the dirt roads that are beside chicken houses, that are beside ditches, that aren't well lit. And so from a safety perspective, we felt like, if there's a responsibility we had to equip those new drivers with a skill set to be able to do that. They might have to operate a boom on a farm to deliver feed in addition to driving that truck. So an intensive 240 hours once you're an employee with a company with a hands-on in-classroom training along with a certified driver trainer that's going along with you until such time that you show the proficiency necessary to move into a driver classification where you're going to drive on your own. Maintenance programs. I'm running a welding program right now with Sussex Technical High School. That is for our existing maintenance staff to skill them up. We are talking to them about things like electrical motor controls, PLC training. Down in, we are working with Deltec with advanced manufacturing. We are building out a program in-house where we have the ability to assess our current maintenance staff and also provide them with upskilling of what they have today. That same program allows us to evaluate maintenance candidates to see if they have the skill set that we need as well. We're working with community colleges on industrial refrigeration programs. You name it, anything that we can do to either upskill our current staff or get in the face of students who are in these programs as well. Upskilling current staff is an example. We have 10,000 employees, right? We do a lot of PMs on weekends on our equipment when we're not running. We have people that work in operations that come in and help us on the weekends doing PMs. How do we identify them? How do we upskill them to make them our next maintenance workforce as well? So again, I could probably go on and on and on for an hour or so about the things that we're doing and what we're entertaining to make those inroads, but we don't have that time today. I was also asked about newer proposed laws and regulations that affect our ability to find and retain employees. And these three, I don't know about the ability to find or retain, but they certainly are going to have an impact on labor, right? When we talk about paid leave laws, we certainly know what it looks like on utilization and presenteeism when you have, vacation, when you have FMLA that's unpaid and things of that nature, and we know how to staff appropriately for that. What does that dynamic look like when paid leave comes down the pipe and people can get perhaps up to 80 to 90% replacement pay when they're out on that leave as well? How is that going to impact our need for staffing? Legalized marijuana. Our company is huge on safety, first and foremost. And guess what? We random drug test, Marijuana's on that panel today. Again, operations Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, and North Carolina. What's that look like going forward? What kind of impact does that have? What do we have to do to address it in our workforce itself? So, what's it look like when you go from perhaps a panel that has marijuana to a panel that doesn't have marijuana? What are you doing to train and equip frontline supervisor to recognize the signs of someone being under the influence from a safety perspective? Safety, always. I don't want anybody hurting anybody else because they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol or anything else. So certainly, those are all considerations for us. When we think about trends, it's been said more than once today, the demand for remote work is here and it's here to stay. Now, that's great and it works. Technology is a lot better today than it was 10 years ago. We've all gotten accustomed to Zoom and all those things. But we got a significant amount of our workforce that just can't do that because they got to be present on a day-to-day basis. And then we have people in high-skilled areas like information technology who maybe don't want to move to the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina, places like that. They want to work remote. So how do we deal with those demands and those needs as well? And so we're looking at policies around that and how do we address those things also. The need for automation also drives a need to fill a new and growing skill gap that we have. The more and more automation we bring into our plants, the more people that we need to address those pieces of equipment and keep them PM'd and running on a daily basis as well. So when we think about that, or when I think about addressing that, I think about it from a baseball analogy, and that's something I touched on a minute ago. Who do I have today that's already in my workforce who understands our company, our business, understands our work environment, has a skill base and an aptitude to fill in an area like maintenance, and then what can I do to build that skill set from A ball to double A ball to triple A ball to the pros, right? And guess what? Along the way, we change their lives because they get the benefit of the skills and not only the skills, but the wages that go along with that. We do a tremendous amount in-house also in developing people into leadership roles. And we use things like Blanchard situational leadership. We use principles from the Arbiter Institute. And again, I could take someone who is an individual contributor working in a plant, general labor, who has the right skill set and aptitude to be a frontline supervisor. I can equip them with those soft skills, and I could change their life for the future as well. And so we work very hard, not only looking externally with what we're going to need to do to fill that skill gap, but what can we do internally with existing resources that we have to build that skill gap, or to fill that skill gap as well. Last but not least, I was asked to talk about what's the outlook for 2023. And this is a Pat Townsend perspective on that. We've already established that I'm an HR guy with a degree in biology, so I'm not an economist or anything of that nature. But here's what I do know. If you look at CPI over the last 12 months, it was 8.2%. If you look at April to September annualized, it dropped to 4.1%. If you look at July through September annualized, it dropped to 2%, right? So all those inflation things that we talked about slowing down, that also means prices are coming down. Same time, federal interest rates has risen to a rate that we haven't seen since the 1990s. All of the things we talked about earlier have driven wages higher, right? So now prices are coming down, wages are higher. They generally don't go backwards, right? So that's going to put pressure on businesses. That, along with other things, new legislation, the administrative burdens that come along with those things, will continue to put pressure on businesses in that perspective. We talked about the unemployment numbers, and a couple people touched on a couple of these other numbers that that I'm going to talk about. Unemployment nationally, 3.7, Maryland, 4.5, Delaware, 5.1. But then, those all sound pretty good, but then you got to look at some of the other things, right? Unemployment, long-term unemployment, those unemployed more than 27 weeks represent 20%, 19.5% of the people that are unemployed. And then the number that I don't think we talk about enough is labor participation, right? If you look at, how do we define labor participation? How does the government define labor participation? And that we're at 62.2% right now. I think we have to, I very much believe we have to solve for that, not only here on the shore, but in this country, to solve some of the labor needs that we have as well. So what's that tell me? I think that we're likely to see better labor availability in certain areas. Probably support roles, right? In our world, in my world today in poultry, the closer you are to the bird, the better off you are, right? Because the bird's always coming. The further you get away from the bird, we got to ask ourselves a question, and we have to justify the need for those positions in our organization. And we're not the only ones. You're already hearing things on the news from other big companies about what they're looking at. And I think that's going to continue unless there's a change. I don't think that it's likely that we'll see any improvements in labor availability for direct labor in that skilled labor sector that we need. Again, maintenance, CDL drivers, nurses, other areas as well, because the gap's already there, and it's going to take a long, long time to change that. I was having a conversation at the table earlier, right? I'm as guilty as anybody, told my kids, go get a 4-year degree, right? And that served them well. But boy, I tell you what, there's a lot of opportunity today, and I see it day in and day out, for kids who are willing to go to a technical high school, go through a CTE program, maybe go to a 2-year community college, get a skill, and take that into the workforce, and they're actually making more money than the kids with the 4-year degrees. And they're ahead of the game on them as well. And so there's a balance there. Neither of them is going to serve the need. We need a balance between the two. And I do spend a lot of time with our, community college leaders down in North Carolina in particular, because we have some really big operations down there. And we always talk about, how do you make that 2-year degree sexy to the kids that that are coming out today so that they're really interested in it. There are great careers out there to be had that don't require a 4-year degree. There are great careers to be had that also require a 4-year degree. We just need a better balance between the two.
Thank you so much. I think that's an important part of the message. Let's give them a round of applause. So, I'm gonna beat this into the ground, but opportunity and collaboration. What I heard from these three up here is it's about managing expectations. It's about managing expectations as an employer, as an educator, but also as an employee who's entering the workforce. And so I think there is opportunity, but it's gonna take us working with those trainers and those educators and with those institutions in the community that can help teach people the skills they need to have a meaningful career.